while I am trying to keep up with watching 4 games at the same time of these MLS midweek action, as promised, I am going to be talking about the Kaku suspension situation, where today, finally, Disco has announced the amount of suspension that Kaku is going to additionally receive. And I'm not quite sure, should I say unsurprisingly or surprisingly? I think mostly I would say surprisingly, is that Disco has announced that Kaku will only be receiving an additional 2 games for his reckless conduct and for what he did in that game against Sporting KC, where he basically kicked the ball into a stand and injured one of the fans. And also, he has been fined with an undisclosed amount. And, you know, as much as I'm absolutely shocked with this amount of suspension, an absolute applaud of how few games that Kaku is going to be suspended because of that situation. And I'm obviously not alone. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are shocked about this, and a lot of people are absolutely fuming at what Disco of how they only give Kaku 2 game suspension after not even just like they said it's a reckless kind of misconduct. This was more than reckless. This was just absolute disgusting kind of misconduct that Kaku did in that game. But at the same time, I actually am in some way not surprised the fact that Disco only gave him 2 games, mainly because we've seen this before with Disco of how they handle situation and how they basically handle some of these kind of extreme situation of kind of reckless misconduct a player has happened during game. I remember a couple of years ago when Clint Dempsey actually was suspended 3 games because he ripped one of the referee notebook in a U.S. Open Cup game, and I thought that seems a little bit too few of a game of him getting suspended, considering the fact that when you decided to rip up a referee notebook, that kind of is right on the borderline of the league policy, where if you decided to abuse or assault a referee, you're automatically gonna serve at least 6 games suspension. So I thought maybe he could have got at least 6 games in that situation, but he only got 3 games. And the thing is, one other thing that was so frustrated about that suspension is the fact that they only announced a couple of days leading up to the match. And this has been something that I'm always confused of why Disco decided to, like, only a couple of days before the game starts and that the player is available for the next game, why do they start announcing then that is when we're going to announce some additional punishment that we are going to hand out to these players? Why not announce at the same time when he got the red card? Like, this is an extreme situation. I don't know why do they, like, I'm pretty sure it does take time for them to handle this, but why in the world do they are able to handle some of the minor kind of discipline at first, and then they have to later on receive and announce these kind of information of the additional games that a player gets suspended in these kind of major situations? That is something I just do not get. And then another example was a couple of years ago too. I believe Tim Howard actually racially abused the fans in the stands, and I think he got 4 games in that one. And I thought it was pretty fair because when you decided to make some abusive kind of comments to the fans, yeah, you are definitely gonna slap with a pretty big suspension. And the thing that I don't get is why is that, like, that situation is just as kind of a same situation than what Kaku did here. In fact, I would say this is even more extreme. I think kicking a ball and injure a fan, that seems much more extreme than just kind of racially abuse fans like what Tim Howard did in that situation. So why in the world, if that's a 4-game suspension, why isn't this a 4-game suspension too? And I know there are also going to be people say, well, he didn't intend it to hurt the fans. His original intention was just hit the advertisement board. I kind of said this back when I talked about this original situation. I really don't care if there is intention or not. Intention is not what we should really talk about in this situation. And even if we really need to talk about this situation, you know that when you decided to kick the ball into an advertisement board, and since nowadays with the advertisement board for most stadium, including Children Mercy Park, is literally right next to the first row, that is there's a huge risk where if a player hits an advertisement board, it can potentially hit a fan, because the advertisement board is not very high, and if a fan is like leaning toward the advertisement board and that ball kind of ricochet, it can basically just hit their face. It is a very extremely dangerous kind of thing, and I just think that how in the world is that not more than 3 or 4 games? I mean, he not only injured that fan, there's even report that he actually had suffered a concussion, and that there was even more report of how he needs like eye surgery. And if I'm that fan that got injured from this situation, do you think that they need to like file a lawsuit against Kaku because of this situation? Because as I mentioned before, this is right on the borderline of just kind of domestic battery and domestic kind of assault that someone does. And I know, I shouldn't really need to bring much of this up, because Kaku, he's an athlete, and whenever it happens during a game, usually these talk about lawsuits is kind of like invalid. But still, after if they hear how many games that Kaku has been suspended because of that action, I would definitely not be surprised if they do file a lawsuit, and just file a lawsuit not only to the league but also for Kaku for basically asking them for an additional game suspension. But yeah, at the end of the day, as many people would say, that this is definitely like, Disco's got to do something with not only just try to fix future kind of when they have to deal with these incidents in the future. They need to do it a little bit better, but they need to be more consistent in terms of some of the punishment that they have put. Like, as I mentioned about the Tim Howard and Clint Dempsey issue, and even some of the minor issue, like let's say embellishment, simulation kind of policy, or hands to the face policy. There's been so many times where it happens a lot during games, and sometimes it seemed like Disco just kind of like handpicks some of the situation and decide to find those guys. But in other situation that has kind of similar intent of how if there's another player decided to basically dive in a game or put a hand into the face of the opponent, he does not get fined, even though the other player that does the same thing in a different game gets fined for that. So the inconsistency of Disco is just something that they have to fix in the future. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this incident? Do you think, like myself included, that this suspension that Kaku received is way too few, and that it seemed like Disco once again let off a person or a player that commits a serious kind of reckless foul off a little bit too easy? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I of course will see you guys next time.